Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Kingston Mayor Brian Patterson to join us today for a quick chat. And we're going to take this beyond the typical, beyond politics, and really get to know some of our elected officials. And that's what brings Mayor Patterson to us today. And I think so often, Mayor Patterson, what shapes someone's philosophy, perhaps even their leadership style, decisions you make as an elected official, oftentimes that stems from things that happened during childhood, when you were growing up. So tell us a little bit about your youth and how you eventually came to make Kingston your home.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because you don't often reflect on how your background can kind of steer you in different directions. I didn't grow up in Kingston. I actually grew up in the Toronto area. And my first experience with Kingston was actually on a school trip back in grade 7. We stopped in to see Fort Henry, which is one of the major tourist attractions in Kingston, and spent an afternoon there. But other than that, I knew nothing about Kingston. And it really wasn't until I completed my undergraduate degree in economics, and I was looking to do some graduate work. I had a few different options for a few different schools, but Queen's University was certainly kind of stuck out to me. And so there's actually a lot of people living in Kingston that have a similar story, that it was a university that kind of drew them to the town. And I remember completing a year. It was a master's program in economics, and I experienced my first summer in Kingston. And I have to tell you, when you experience a summer in a city like Kingston, or even like a region like the Thousand Islands, it really captures you. And so I ended up staying and doing some more graduate work, finished my PhD. And by then, Kingston had become home, and so I was fortunate enough to secure full-time employment, and then really now it's my adopted home. So that's sort of, I guess, the road about how I came to Kingston. So it's a great city, it's a great home, but certainly did not know growing up that this is where I would be.
What age did you say to yourself, I'm interested in economics, and what drew you into that discipline?
So it's a great question. It was my first year of my undergraduate program, and I didn't know at that point what I really wanted to do career-wise. And I had an instructor for a first-year course in economics, and he was the best teacher that I have ever had. He inspired. He opened up, a whole view of what a lens of economics and what it can provide to the country and to the world around you. And it just clicked. And so it's not something that I ever thought of, that I would go into that field, but I really had a passion for it and was successful with it. So I sort of continued first at an undergraduate level and then had desires to go on. And what's interesting is that now today, I teach that same first year introductory course that he taught me many years ago. And so every time that I walk into the classroom, I always take it as a challenge to hopefully inspire some of my students in the same way that he inspired me. So Jim Fraser was his name. It was many years ago. I'm not even sure where he is now, but I'll never forget him. He was the one that helped steer me in this direction.
I have a couple questions about how economics may influence or impact your work as mayor. Yeah. First, let's go with the obvious one. So often when an economy is struggling, whether it's a cities, a regions, a provinces, it doesn't matter. People turn to economists for answers. How has having that expertise impacted your ability to lead the city of Kingston? Yeah,
I'd say it's been very valuable in a variety of different ways. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, just navigating, for us, a $400 million budget for running the city. Obviously, being comfortable with that sort of quantitative analysis is really important. But I think in a broader sense, I think just understanding some of the economic challenges that come and that you have to deal with as a community leader. And, I've always believed that economic challenges can really drive a lot of other political and social pressures and changes. And so whether it's, obviously dealing with the housing crisis that we're experiencing in Kingston and in the province of Ontario, whether it's dealing with some of the financial trade-offs with obviously higher interest rates, and wondering how do we finance the growth that we know we're seeing in our community. We're growing faster than we ever have before, and that brings a lot of opportunities, but it also brings some challenges. So how do we grow? how do we attract the talent that we need? And so I think economics just helps, I think, in providing that larger, big picture lens for which you have to see how a number of things all have to kind of work together. And obviously, part of that is a passion for economic development and attracting business and job opportunities, making sure that young people growing up in our community have great career prospects. And I think that that's vital to the long-term health of the city.
You mentioned young people, which brings me to my other question about economics. You're still teaching students, you're in a classroom.
Yeah.
How has that influenced or affected your ability to kind of understand the work of educators and teachers in your community?
Well, I mean, I think it helps to be able to identify. And obviously that's probably one of Kingston's main industries is education. And so it's great to have a role in that space. I actually really appreciate having something that is outside of my current role as mayor. I actually think that that's really important for a politician. It keeps you grounded. It gives you a different lens. Every time I drive through the gates of Royal Military College, which is Canada's military university, that's where I teach. I basically leave my mayor title at the side and I take on a different persona. And so I think it's beneficial for me, but I think it's also beneficial for the students because there's many times where we're talking about different theories or concepts, and I can bring a real world example of something that I'm dealing with right now in the chair as mayor of Kingston. And so I think that they get benefit from it. Certainly it benefits me as well. And I think that it's certainly something that I appreciate and value, and ultimately is something that I will look forward to returning to full time whenever my political career is finished.
Do the students ever come with political questions for you? I'm assuming they know you're mayor.
Always, yes. No, word travels very quickly. And so it's interesting because most of the students wouldn't be from Kingston. So most of them are coming from other parts of Canada. And so they wouldn't immediately know that. And so when they find that out, I think it's a curiosity, it's a novelty. But I think that they do come with questions. And some of them actually start following local politics in Kingston in a way that they otherwise, could care less. But because, that they know that I'm their instructor, that they do like to push and to probe. And so we can have some really good discussions. Sometimes they're part of a formal classroom setting, and sometimes it's just those conversations before or after a lecture where they might bring different issues to me.
So you mentioned, teaching gives you a break from the daily grind of working in the mayor's office. What other hobbies do you have, and what other ways do you, kind of put the stress of running a city aside?
Well, you're absolutely right. Like it's very important to have things to kind of help you to kind of cope with what can be a stressful job. And so certainly, I run in the mornings. I find that that's actually a great stress reliever. I'm a huge baseball fan, actually. So big Toronto Blue Jays fan. Love baseball. Several generations of my family have always been baseball fans, and now my son is playing for Kingston's rep baseball team, and so we spent a lot of time at the Diamond. A lot of time we were watching the All-Star game just recently. So I think it's great to just have fun things that you can do as a family. I enjoy reading. I enjoy going for walks, and it's one of the things that I really treasure about this whole region. If you think about whether it's Kingston or the Thousand Islands region, is just the waterfront trails, the green spaces that you can go to. And so sometimes people will find me sitting on a park bench with a baseball cap over on my head, just reading a book and just getting some quiet time. So those are some of the things that I think that I enjoy. It's just, it's nice. I do love the job. It's the most interesting job I've ever had, but it is also nice sometimes to go where you're a little bit less known, a little more anonymous. And so sometimes that's one of the things we'll do is we'll just drive, a couple hours away and so go to a community where, I can kind of blend in a little bit more. And so that's always fun to do as well.
For folks who live outside Kingston and the islands, what do you think are some common misperceptions? If you had an opportunity to say, you're getting this wrong about Kingston, what do you think that is, and what would you tell them?
Well, it's interesting. I think a perception of a community is often built up over time. And so I think that some of the perceptions that people have of Kingston were actually very true for many years, but they're not as true anymore. So I'll give you an example. So most people, if they think of Kingston, they usually think of like a government town, like a public sector town. We've got lots of, obviously the university and hospital and prisons, and we've got a number of different like public institutions. What's interesting is that now Kingston's private sector is larger than its public sector. And that's really in just the last five to 7 years. So now I think that it's really shifting the identity of the city. We've got an entrepreneurial class, some really exciting growth in manufacturing, electric vehicle manufacturing, for example. That's the auto sector is not something you would typically associate with Kingston or Eastern Ontario, but now we're seeing a supply chain for the batteries that will power electric vehicles. So I think those are a couple of things I think would be surprising to people. Just how much the community has changed, and even just the diversity of the community. It's really changed. There's a large increase in visible minorities even in the community, and again, I think that that's something that would have been very different, and you wouldn't have expected in Kingston even 5 or 10 years ago.
You're proud of your city, I can tell.
Absolutely, sure. Absolutely. I think that that's, boy, if the mayor isn't the top cheerleader of the community, there's a problem. And I've always seen that that's part of my role, but you can't put it on, right? It has to be authentic. And one of the things that I enjoy the most is when I'm speaking with other leaders from other communities, and they learn that I'm the mayor of Kingston. There's almost always a very positive reaction to be like, oh, I love Kingston, it's a beautiful city. And so yeah, you take that on, but you also take on the responsibility of preserving what's beautiful and also making the community better. You know, and that's always been my greatest desire, is that I would leave the city stronger at the end of my mandate than when I first started. And so I think that that's what gets you up in the morning every day. That's what pushes you through some of the challenges that come with political life. But definitely, it's a great community. Well,
cheerleader, mayor, economist, teacher, Brian Patterson, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks very much, Michael. Preserve community better, you know, and that's always been my